particular wine and another cider rather, hard cider from this region. They're poured using this, and they literally will. The bartenders will literally stand up and as I mean, I'm not going to go further than that, but it goes about 4 or 5 feet. I mean, with the hand over their head, and they will pour this wine um, in this dramatic fashion. They call it breaking the bubbles. So by pouring it from a little altitude, it splashes pretty hard into the glass, and it creates it aerates it. It opens it up. But so this let's see, the winery is actually, it's perfect. That church steeple. The winery is located at the base of that church steeple. And I'm going to show you, I looked to see whether I had any good photos of the vineyards, because they literally dot the hillsides behind the village, which pretty much clings to the side of these cliffs. That's a little sort of, so actually behind me, there we go. Behind me is the restaurant El Cano, which is a spectacular seafood restaurant and one of Anthony Bourdain, the late Anthony Bourdain's favorite restaurants in Spain. It's truly an experience. The menu changes during the day as the fishermen from that little marina behind me, behind me in the former picture. They bring it in, the menu changes because somebody caught something that day, and it doesn't get any fresher than that. But I picked this picture because if you look behind me, sort of that green wall that climbs up above that box truck there, that at the top of that well, you can actually start to see the vineyards begin, but that's basically where the vineyards are located. They're located in the backdrop behind this seaside town. So really the reason to convey all this is this wine, has a very distinct sense of place. It is, the grapes are grown in a way that can only be done here. They are cultivated and vinified. They used to do it in these traditional old oak barrels. They don't use that anymore. I mean, large barrels like Foudres, very large, large barrels, but most of them are stainless steel, so they don't want oak flavoring added. They're just wanting kind of a neutral aging vessel. So most of it is stainless steel, but it not coincidentally pairs spectacularly well with anything out of the water, and of course that is what they're eating. So it's a wine that is just a beautiful wine. It's a summer refresher. It's served at every bar in Basque Country, and again very dramatically. So let's take a sippy sip of the of 2023 Chaman Arance. I'm not even going to go for it. I know the TXOMIN is Chaman, but that's all I can stab at. But yeah, 2023.
We won't call you on it.
Yeah, I mean, just vibrant acidity. Mouth is still watering. Kind of a green apple, underripe nectarine, a little stone fruit there, some lime juice maybe, but just and then almost like a little bit of a saline thing. I mean, it would make sense that the grapes had some level of salinity, not for any mojo of winemaking, but simply because they sit right above the ocean, and the Atlantic can get pretty rough and a lot of wind. In fact, the vineyards are usually sheltered in some way from the wind. They won't plant the absolute top of the hill, and they will often position them southeast facing so that they're slightly out of the wind. But there it would make sense that there would be a little bit of sea mist blown onto the grapes, which you know, not these grapes unless there's a rain right before they're harvested, which they usually deliberately try to avoid because the grapes swell with water. They'll harvest before that, but you know, provided that the salt hasn't been washed off, it would make sense that maybe a hint of it would show up in the wine, um, and that you would taste that salinity. But yeah, it's a wine that has a very short shelf life. You really want to drink the bottles within about a year and a half of their date. It is actually, I'm looking at this. So 2023, this is current vintage. So I'm gonna say typically that would be the case, but we're gonna go with maybe 2 years on this guy. Because I can think this would be still quite good given the acidity. At any rate, yeah, about a year and a half, sometimes two. But the brightness is really what you're looking for, the real vibrancy of the wine. And again, when it's a young wine, but they make sparkling wine out of this. They do a rosé. They're red variants of the Handarabi grape. And so they do a rosé out of this, but yeah, that beautiful bright acidity, it puts you right here. So Kathleen, definitely you have to put Kataria on your list. It is I mean, it's just there, you know, if you where that church steeple is, it's sort of a winding neighborhood of cobblestone streets, and just really, I mean, you're truly getting an authentic taste of Basque country. And again, I mean, everything is good, everything. Like there's an ice cream shop along that cobblestone street that people drive in. I can't remember the original claim to fame for this ice cream shop, but it's one that people, I mean, I would go here just for the wine or to eat at El Cano, and there are people who come here just for the ice cream. So even the ice cream is good.
Could have
So,
wine floats, maybe. How's that?
oh, I mean, that, you know, within about 100 yards on this cobblestone street, you could pretty much eat and drink to your heart's content.
Sounds
Uh,
good.
and so any questions on the white?
Anybody have any observations or thoughts? Oh, we got something in the chat. You feel free to either. Jack says, when you said short shelf life, I assume you meant I need to finish the bottle tonight, which I'm good with.
Oh,
It's
oh,
delicious and pairs well.
yeah.
Thank
I
you for
mean,
that, Jack.
the thing is, the wine does naturally have a little bit of an effervescence. It's not really intentional. I mean, I guess it kind of is. Yeah, I guess it is, because that's why you break the bubbles. There's dissolved CO2. Um, that CO2 does preserve it a little bit. But yeah, the vibrancy of this wine, once it's opened, you really, I mean, you could cork it and put it in the fridge and store it, and it would last at least the next day, still be delicious. But no, I guess I'm saying with short shelf life, it's not a wine like if this had come in as say 2021, even 22, I probably would have thought about and tasted. It's not a wine that you don't load, you know, you wouldn't want to load your wine cellar with one vintage of this. I mean, this is one, the distributor doesn't even bring it in. I mean, it's not a wine that the distributor is constantly bringing in because they don't want it to sit around. They want it fresh. So this hit the show. I mean, hit our store maybe 2 weeks ago. And so it's super fresh. But yeah, it's once it's open, it'll last, you know, a couple 3 days before you probably want to, you know, deglaze a pan with it. But it's the other thing is it's fairly, let's see, what is it on this one? Sorry, I'm looking for the oh, there it is, 11.5% ABV. So even if you did drink the whole bottle, it's a fairly light wine, and that is, you know, in again, a sense of place. It's a fairly cool region, and the the Atlantic Ocean is cold. It moderates the temperature, but it's gonna have a harder time developing abundant sugars. So the tartness of the wine would be different if it were allowed to ripen more completely. And so, the fact that it's 11.5 is pretty indicative of this place. So another great reflection of this wine and where it's from.
Comment from Cliff. Shout out to Steve for mentioning the Basque language. It's not related to any other language in the world.
It
That's
is,
interesting.
yeah, no, I mean, it really is a spectacular. I mean, that's just one of the components. I mean, the the scenery is wonderful because they've been there so long, and the design, I mean, I don't know. I could go on. It really everything is good, and the because of the abundance of where Basque Country's located. I mean, there's probably a good reason why they sustained so long, and it's the fact that they can, graze animals in the valleys where the grapes aren't growing. They've got the ocean providing them an abundance of seafood. I mean, they really have all of their farmers markets are insane. I mean, they have everything that they can possibly need. And um it really, I mean, yeah, the food, San Sebastian actually, and San Sebastian's probably 20 minutes drive from here. Maybe a little longer, but about that half-hour drive from this place. But San Sebastian has more Michelin restaurants per capita than any other place on the planet aside from Kyoto, Japan. I mean,
Wow.
and these are not, I mean, there are five maybe Michelin starred restaurants that are what you would expect. You're going to spend 3-4 hours there. You might spend 3-4 thousand there. You're going to spend a lot of money. However, the there's a tradition in this area called pinchos, and elsewhere in Spain, you'd call it tapas. Pinchos are actually smaller in size than tapas. So the tradition in Basque Country is you go to the kind of the old city center in San Sebastian. It's a neighborhood called Parte Vieja, and I mean, it's medieval in its look, cobblestone streets, really tight alleys, and the bars and the restaurants that sit on along these alleys are generally staffed with people who, if they don't work in a Michelin restaurant, they could. And so you go into a bar. Every bar has specialties. Depending on, I mean, they all have a signature item as well as a host of other things, and then items that are, again, they caught a particular fish today, so one of our items will involve that fish. So you go into the pinchos bars, you pay 3-4 euro for a plate that is maybe 2 bites and 3 bites and absolutely spectacular, and you get yourself a glass of chocolate, and you eat and you drink your wine, and the wine, I mean, a glass would be probably a good 3 ounces. It's not you're not, the idea is to stay in the game for a good while. I mean, maybe like a dozen of these stops. So you and then you crumple up your napkin because it's a sign of pride. The restaurants that have the most crumpled up napkins on the floor, and you litter, and then you leave and you go to the next place and you rinse and repeat. And it is literally, you can eat food that would show up at again Michelin starred eateries around the world, that you would pay a significant price for, um, a single course. And here it's 3-4 euro, and I mean, it really is. It's like a training, like a summer training camp for Michelin chefs. They come to San Sebastian, they work in the bars. I mean, they're having to crank out a high volume
Mhm.
of perfectly executed food. And all of their signature items. I mean, like there's a spider crab that exists off the in the Bay of Biscay. Hard to catch, but they do a dish with. I mean, they're famous for these little spider crab tartlets and mushrooms. They grow the craziest mushrooms, and that's the thing. You go in and it's this sautéed mushroom on a little crostini, and I mean, it's a fantastic way to spend a day. Oh, and then you go to the beach and have your siesta, and then start it up in the night and do it until you're done.
Hey,
Good times. And this is
awesome.
again, this is a fixture in the Pinchos bars in Basque Country.
So Cliff had a follow-up question of how do you get to the village? And I presume he means, is it Guitarria?
Oh yeah, yeah. So, um, you could, I mean, say from Madrid, I'm guessing it's probably 3-4 hours drive, maybe a little longer. From the city of Bilbao, which is a major kind of it is the Basque capital. Bilbao is probably an hour and a half, maybe hour, something like that. But I would suggest you would want to go up to, if you're visiting, you would want to go up to Basque Country, and probably again stay in Bilbao, stay in San Sebastian. Guitarria I wouldn't say would be a place to stay. I mean, you can pretty much do it in a day. But it's a very easy drive from both Bilbao and San Sebastian, so it's something you can get to. In fact, starting in Bilbao, stopping by Guitarria, and ending up in San Sebastian is an easy. I mean, that's a 1-day trip. You wake up in Bilbao and go to bed in San Sebastian with a delicious 3-hour lunch. By the way, El Cano is a Michelin 1-star restaurant, but you can go there for lunch for pretty reasonable price. Certainly not what you would pay in New York for a similar style meal.
Doug Marples, sorry about that, suggests pairing this wine with sea urchin bisque.
Yes. No, yes, he's correct. There's an abundance of sea urchins, and they will take the shell and basically a sea urchin, I don't know, think of it about the size of a beefsteak tomato, maybe a little smaller. And you shave off the top of it, and inside you have the sea urchin and sea urchin roe, and they will take these cups, these sea urchin shells, and they will make a bisque and garnish it with sea urchin roe. And so you're standing there in a Pinchos bar holding this seashell, eating the kind of the most delicious decadent soup ever. I mean, again, like you could go into another one and get. I mean, this happened. We were in San Sebastian. We went into a bar, and somebody we were with ordered foie gras. Now, in the United States, if you ordered the foie gras, seared goose liver, pan-seared goose liver, if you ordered that in the United States, I guess I should say where it's legal, because it's not legal everywhere. But if you, it would be $25 for 2 or 3 crostini with a little medallion of foie gras. So that was the assumption, and he ordered the foie gras, which it was probably €20. It wasn't stupefyingly expensive. Turned out it was a whole foie gras lobe. So it was in foie gras terms, it would be the equivalent of the 2-pound bone-in ribeye in foie gras. It was grotesque. I mean, yeah. I mean, so we had about 10 people, and we did demolish it because it seemed the right thing to do. But it was not a single serving. It was the party platter. But that's I mean, that's the thing. That's what you get here. I mean, you really, and if anybody is interested, I do have a list of all of the bars and their specialties and what to get. Because it does require a lot of planning. There's too much to miss. But yeah, you can kind of plan your day where the last stop is I would have said it 5 seconds ago. Anyway, the last stop is a bar that is famous for Basque cheesecake, which Basque cheesecake sort of looks like American cheesecake that we wrapped with parchment paper, and then burned it. And it, because it definitely has a lot of caramelization and not so much char, but it's kind of the marshmallow that got a little extra toasty. Um, but it's a very famous style of cheesecake, crustless, and again, kind of looks like it was burned a bit. And you have that with a pour of a sweet style Spanish sherry. So you can really start. You can start with appetizers and work your way through your mains, and then your last stop is for sherry and Basque cheesecake, and then you can call it quits. But yeah, it's a marathon.
Sounds like a full day to me.
Yes,
I'll
yes.
be in touch.
So let's move on to the red. The red is very cool. It's from a producer called Muga, and where I guess so geographically, from where we are right now, in Guitaria, we're gonna drive maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours inland. There's still going to be mountains there, providing some shelter. It's going to get less lush. There'll be, I wouldn't say it looks like high desert, but it's a little more scrubby. And that's where the reds are grown in Basque Country. They need a little more warmth. They need a little more time ripening. So cloud cover and fog are things that are less desirable in these wines. But Muga is a very famous winery. Started in the 1920s, and it sits in a town called Haro. Well, Aro, Haro, and Aro is a fairly small town. Again, medieval in its appearance. Lots of stone buildings, cobblestone streets, and whatnot. But Aro is famous for the what's called the Golden Mile. There are about 7 or 8 wineries that sit along the same street in Aro, and they're kind of considered the very, very best examples of Rioja producers. And Muga sits on this street. Actually, it's called Barrio Estacion, the station neighborhood. And Barrio Estacion is sort of the homage for this wine. So this is Muga started this project, I want to say in 2018. It's fairly new. El Anden de la Estación is the I think that means basically the track, what am I trying to say? The platform, the railroad platform where you would board, because Aro is famous for having a railroad station that would connect to Bordeaux, which is about 2-3 hours drive from here, 3-4 hours drive from here. And that railroad, I mean, because during the 1850s, there was an outbreak of a root-borne louse that decimated Bordeaux. The French, they lost all their vines. So at that time, a lot of winemakers went over the Pyrenees because this root-borne louse could not make it over the Pyrenees. They don't swim, and they weren't going to be able to survive in the soils that exist as you go over the Pyrenees. So Spain was protected from this phylloxera, this root-borne louse, and so a lot of the winemakers from Bordeaux started coming to northern Spain. And this is where they ended up, and in Rioja. And they did they really kind of changed history, because the Bordelais, obviously brilliant winemakers. They have their own traditions, and they didn't really, they didn't come into Spain and say, hey, you should plant Cabernet and Merlot and Cabernet Franc just the way we do. They said, you should grow the grapes that you grow here. that do well here, but you should do some different things. Like, let us show you how to train vines to be more productive. And that was something that they were open to learning. And so the French taught them a lot of viticulture techniques in the vineyard. They then taught them a lot in the winery. Two things that really, really changed the wines of this place. One of them was they taught them how to filter. So it was really just all they had to do was put their barrels on essentially shelves. And as the gravity would pull the sediment out of the first barrel, they would rack off the clear liquid into a new barrel, and they would keep doing that. And each time leaving the sediment in the barrel, in the previous barrel. So they were able to clarify the wine, which I think we all appreciate, clarity in our wine. It also helps that the sediment is really astringent, bitter things that we don't really want in the wine. And so when those get filtered out, the wine becomes polished. And that was very Bordelais. The Bordelais, the French are really, really keen on polish. So racking was the first thing. And then barrel aging. They said, you guys should really use oak barrels to age your wine. Don't stone, clay, no, try oak, because that was very much a French thing. Now I apologize, I actually forget the reason. It was an early connection to the United States of this area, but basically to this day they do not choose to use a lot of French oak, which in the winemaking world you pretty much, I mean, there are a whole host of different oaks, but the vast majority of them fall into either French or American. The Basque chose American. So, but being really meticulous. So the wineries, all of them do this, along this so-called Golden Mile. They actually they'll order American oak in just pure lumber, and they will actually cooper the barrels themselves. So they make their own barrels on their own property, because it's that important that they control every aspect of the process. So they actually construct their own barrels, which is just mind blowing. But so yeah, the French, this as the French started making wine and improving the wine of Rioja, they needed to ship back to the very thirsty French. And so a railroad was established connecting Otto with Bordeaux. So this is sort of an homage to the old Otto railroad station. The grape is Tempranillo, fairly young. It spent a year in bottle before it was, year in barrel rather, before it was released. And it is just a really nice expression of kind of everyday drinking Tempranillo. It's got some nice cherry. You definitely smell some oak notes to it. Definitely some furniture wood smells, but black cherry. Yeah, just that really nice plum, like stone fruit flavor, accented with a little bit of that vanilla from the oak. You do taste it's not, the nice thing is the way they will often make these wines is they will rack the barrel several times. So they the newness of the barrels is not aggressive. So you get rather than just having this really, really intense vanilla flavor, which you'll find in some wines. If you ever smell a wine and it just smells like vanilla extract, that was a brand new barrel and it probably had a good char on it and it spent some time there. This is more of an accent. But now Muga, this is a wonderful wine. Again, they love to eat. So very, very versatile with food, fatty fish, certainly pork, lamb is wonderful with this. It has a sort of a savoriness. You can kind of get some tomato fruit off this. So I mean, it's gonna be really complementary to a lot of different foods. Mm,
Yeah, it
yeah,
almost is like a coffee flavor to it. It's kind of
yeah, yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah, yep, like
Yeah,
mocha, like
yeah.
mocha, like yeah, because it there's a dark toast, and then there's a little bit of that vanilla. Yeah, it's very. I mean, there's so much going on with this. I mean, and that's why, you mentioned coffee. Like a great way to prepare beef and lamb is to actually rub it with a mixture of like cumin and coffee and coriander. And yeah, you taste a wine like this with roasted, coffee rubbed rack of lamb or something, and now you've got just all sorts of flavors going on. Very, very. I mean, it's again the Basque love to eat. So, in fact, it's funny if you. I was just randomly looking at houses the other day in
Gonna
Basque
move?
country. Just and well, I mean it is. I will say it's a place that I would fantasize about living in
Mhm.
someday. I mean, it is again, everything you could. I mean, yeah, it's just there's so much that talks in my good ear, as it were. Um, but it is I mean that you look at the listings, the housing listings, and two observations. I think the Basque might be hoarders because their houses are really, really cluttered, like unanimously. Like everybody has a really, really, really jam-packed, cluttered house, with the exception of one thing. They all have a room, and I can't, there's a name for it. Um, but they have a room in their basement. And it usually has what looks like a picnic table that seats maybe 12 to 20 people. And there is what sort of looks like a bar. And usually there's actually a jamon hanging from a little hook there. But these rooms, they're fairly Spartan, not overly decorated, and again, not cluttered really. And that's where you hang out with your friends and you eat and drink in large groups in your basement. Because it's certainly the coolest room in the house.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, just really, again, so much to love about this place. Questions about the Rioja?
I have just a weird question. You used the term rack the barrel a
Mhm.
couple of times. What does that mean?
So when so you would take, let's say you have two barrels.
Hmm.
You would take the first barrel and you would sort of sit it on a shelf. All right. And at the bottom of the barrel, and you'd lean it on its side. So it'd sit, I guess, think of it more like one would be sitting in a cradle um, above another. So one is in a cradle and the other is not in a cradle. The other is actually, no, that's not true. It is still in the cradle. So one of them is full, one of them is empty. And basically they will just siphon off the the clear liquid that is up above, and the heavy solids settle out to the bottom of the barrel, and those do not get removed. And they do this multiple times so that each time that um the sediment gets less and less. But it is I mean, I doubt this particular bottling does this, but there's another winery on the Golden Mile called La Rioja Alta. And that winery, not they also build their barrels, they cooper their barrels there, but they rack everything by candlelight. So and actually it's kind of funny. A friend of mine who is Basque, um, his father is an engineer. That's the other insane thing. This area was, I mean, in the modern age, in the industrial age, this area they mine iron ore and make steel and build boats. So they're really again crazy hardworking people, but they're also really very smart. So if you're in a bar and you want to guess somebody's occupation, it's a safe bet just to say engineer. And so this friend of mine's father was, I think he's retired now, but an engineer, and was contracted by La Rioja Alta to make a device to automatically rack the barrels because it seemed excessive to have somebody with a candle, um, going with a siphon and physically racking the barrel. And so he built this, device, machine that did all the work for them. It has never been used. It is still in the warehouse at La Rioja Alta because the employees refuse to use it. They are more proud of their ability to rack a barrel perfectly by candle than they are wanting somebody else to do it automatically. So, I mean, it's just, and those bottles are like $22. So for $22, you get an aged wine that was racked by candlelight, I think 3 times. Like, that's crazy.
They
That's
need to
fast.
add that to their marketing materials.
Oh, I know. I mean, it
Racked by
really,
candlelight.
you are getting a wine that is, again, sense of place totally has it. Like, you will not confuse these wines for other wines made elsewhere. They just taste like this place. But just steeped in tradition, and like every wine has a story. I mean, it's everything I love about wine. It really is. They make wine as an art form, I mean, and they're doing it. I mean, the vineyards here, I mean, the best vineyards um are generally the ones that sit kind of in the foothills of the Sierra Cantabria Mountains. I mean, rocky, hard to get. I mean, nothing is done by machine. I mean, there's just no way of getting machines to a lot of their vineyards. And so it's all manually harvested and manually tended. And it's just amazing. I mean, that in a modern day, those traditions still prevail. And for a price that's totally accessible.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Jack comments that he can taste a tiny bit of chocolate and pepper in this wine as well. So
Yeah, the pepper, I'm guessing the pepper would be probably a derivative of the barrel, probably a barrel spice in this case. God, I don't know. I've trying to see. I'm sitting about 10 feet from a rosemary bush, but I swear I can now smell rosemary in the glass. I don't think it's what I'm. It's always funny. I'll be like, oh my gosh, there's candle. It's burning candle. Then somebody behind me walks by with a candle, it's just, never mind.
interferes.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question from my friend Scott, who's over
Mhm.
here.
Yeah. Mhm.
Of
Here's Scott.
what's the difference between Rioja and Tempranillo?
So, Rioja is the region, and it's a defined region. The Spanish government actually controls I mean, for a wine to be labeled from Rioja, it actually has to pass. I mean, it has to follow very stringent requirements on how many grapes can be grown in a certain space, the types of the specific type of grape, and in this case, a specific Tempranillo variant.
Okay.
So everything is controlled, and then finally the wines actually have to be blind tasted by a panel, because it's a brand that they are very, very proud of, and that they would never ever compromise on. So, I mean, the funny thing is, I mean, yeah, even if you're selling a $10 bottle of the most youthful Tempranillo on the planet, it still has to be tasted by the panel to determine that, yeah, that's Tempranillo at that age and youthful, and it's worth $10.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, it's yeah, So Tempranillo is the grape is the
Grape.
dominant grape of Rioja. There are a couple others. There's a grape called Graciano that also is used, but for the most part, when you're buying Rioja, you're buying the predominant grape plus 75, 85% is going to be, in fact, maybe 90%, 85 to 90, I think maybe the threshold.
Okay.
I think. At least 75. But the predominant grape in the wine is going to be, it has to be, by law, has to be Tempranillo, the grape Tempranillo.
Right. And then I was reading the description of this wine online, and it talked about how it does, there is fining the wine with fresh egg whites. So what's
So
that about?
yes. And it's funny because there are a lot of people who are moving away from that or are not announcing it. But it is fining is another French thing. And
Mhm.
that's actually it's kind of cool that you mentioned that, because I mean, there again, yet another technique adopted from the French. So fining and filtering. So we talked about racking. That is the filtering. Fining is actually the really, really fine polishing. And so typically what they will do is they will add egg white. There is a substance created from fish bladders. It sounds weird, but it it basically causes all of the I think they're just proteins, but all of the sediment to molecularly bond and then fall out of suspension. So people are concerned, because of certainly vegans do not eat eggs. They're moving away from using to using other or not filtering, which I mean not fining, which I don't think is I like. I think a good polished wine, we taste with our eyes first. I think it matters. I think, and it shows us a level of skill. So if you can really, really polish your wine such that, you can almost see the light inside the wine. I mean, where it's just radiant. That's worth something. But yeah, usually that you can use bentonite clay, isinglass, which is the fish bladders. But egg whites are probably one of the most traditional. In fact, in the region of Bordeaux, there is a dessert called a cannelé, and it is probably one of the most unhealthy things ever. The recipe, I think, is like 20, 30 egg yolks, butter, rum, and like, just a hint of flour. And it sort of looks like, I mean, it's a custardy, donutty kind of thing. And the reason that they make canelés is that they use so many egg whites in the process of fining the great wines of Bordeaux that they're left with just oceans of egg
Yolk.
yolks, and they had to come up with something to do with it. And being very French, why not create a dessert? It seems like a good play on their part. But so yeah, that is an additional aspect of French, winemaking, evident in this. And again, there should not be any concern of even from vegans, because the whole concept of the egg yolk is that it coagulates the sediment and the cloudy proteins, and they're removed. So it does a great job at that. And so it's not something you don't have raw egg floating around in your glass.
Right.
So
So I guess there are vegan wines now, right? So presumably
yeah. And
it
and
is.
usually what they'll do, like I said, I think there is a seaweed derived.
Mm.
I mean, certainly bentonite clay would be one of the options. But I think there's some seaweed derived ones. And then the other thing is they just won't filter. They won't fine.
Right.
They will. They will gravity filter, which is kind of the tradition of Rioja. They'll gravity filter and but they won't fine. So you may, I mean, I guess it's a good idea in the sense of trying not to manipulate your wine. I don't know that the consumer is always appreciative if they're not expecting sludge to hit their glass. Sometimes it causes some issues because it can get, again, those all of that sediment eventually over time it will molecularly bond together and fall out of suspension. That's why as a wine ages, it actually gets lighter in color because the pigment that tints the wine falls to the bottom of the bottle and hopefully is not consumed. But
Any questions at all? So you talked about the white wine was younger and has a shorter shelf life. Does this have a longer life than?
oh yes, no, Rioja actually that's probably the greatest thing that can be gotten from a bottle of Rioja. I mean, they age forever. They absolutely age forever. And sorry, got some dogs barking.
Oh,
But
but
yeah.
you're reaching back to
Um,
touch the building.
yes. Sorry. Oh yeah, no, that yes. I was knocking on the green
On the
screen there.
door.
Anyway, no, Rioja is actually, because it does have a fairly high acid, because it spends a good amount of time in barrel. No, these wines age. I mean, you'll see current vintage wines. And I think I've gotten 2008 recently. Now these are in the Grand Reservas. So this is the young style. Then it kind of, as the requirements for the vines increase, you get more time in barrel and better barrels, better fruit. Yeah, I mean, like a bottle that, I mean, I have bottles that I think would retail for $25 that 10 years, 20 years. I would keep around actually as long as I could, because they one of the greatest wines I ever had. It was really funny. I was tasting with a salesman from a winery in Rioja called Bodega Salon. And I said, my wife's aunt passed away and she left in her basement, she left a bottle of wine. And it was a wine from a producer called Marquis de Riscal, which probably she purchased for maybe $3. And it was a 1968, 69 bottle of wine. And so I said, I'm sitting with this guy from Rioja, and I'm like, well, if anybody's going to know what an old bottle should taste like, it's probably you. And if it's dead, I might as well know now. So we cracked that bottle, decanted it aggressively decanted it. We really shook the hell out of it, but to get it to open up. But that was a spectacular wine. And there is no expectation that a $3 bottle, probably purchased it was purchased at a liquor store in Salina, Kansas. Probably not stored in the most optimal way, because we just didn't really think about that much. And it was stunning. So that's Rioja. Like, Rioja is always going to prove to be, it's always going to surprise you. It's always going to provide a little extra something, So very cool stuff.
Well, Kim is taken by your crystals on corks comment.
Crystals on corks. Crystals on corks.
Yes.
I'm unclear.
Kim,
Provide me a refreshment.
you want to unmute? I'm just reading from the chat.
Okay. Just that sometimes, you have a bottle of wine that's been aged for a long time, you get
Yes.
crystals on the cork.
Oh, okay.
I
So yeah, I got you.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that is different. The crystals are actually it's actually cream of tartar. It's crystallized tartaric acid. And the acidity that you find in wine, both white and red, is sort of a complex little stew of different types of acids, and tartaric is one of them that is really considered needed in the wine. But the issue with it is, particularly with white wine, what they will do is they'll deliberately chill the wine down to in the 30 35 degrees, 36 degrees, and it causes the tartaric acid to crystallize. And then they remove that. They actually they don't want it, because there a lot you will find those crystals in white wine bottles where um the they have not been filtered. They go into a cooler or your refrigerator, and they create those crystals. Over time, red wine also has a decent amount of tartaric acid, and those are I think even cooler, just because yeah, those are more ruby color. And the whites get what look like shards of glass. And again, it literally is just what you buy in the grocery store to hold egg whites. It's cream of tartar. In fact, the stuff you buy in the grocery store was probably scraped off of the inside of large tanks at large wineries, ground up, powdered, and sent to I mean, it's food grade coming out of the barrel anyway. So they are probably that's exactly where you're getting it. So but I would say, like we were talking about fining and filtering, I think I like it when white wine producers it's called cold stabilization, where they deliberately chill it down and remove those crystals, because those particularly in white wine, if people are not all entirely sure that they're not consuming glass. And I would imagine there's a fair amount of wine that gets thrown out unjustifiably, unnecessarily, but because of those crystals. But yeah, that is that part will precipitate out faster than the sediment that, I mean, because even though this wine, this Rioja that we have here is clear now, if we held on to it for 10 15 years, it would be much lighter in color, and there would be sediment in the bottle. Sediment that's not there now because, again, those molecular bonds haven't been created, and it hasn't created those chunky, gritty things, which that's generally why we like to decant wine, because the grainy, gritty pigments of the skin, very bitter, not very palatable. So I guess, I love the idea of being, minimal intervention. But I think that there are some intervening techniques that are worth doing, and removing grittiness and cloudiness, I think is probably a good thing in most cases, not all, but most.
Great. Well, with crystals on corks, we will conclude this session of Wine Around the World.
Yeah, actually, by the way, keep your crystals on corks, because as it dries out, there's even more liquid that's in the cork that will, I mean, it's like, I keep the really impressive crystal displays are fun to keep. I have a little dish of corks with some they're called tartrates.
Ooh,
And
interesting.
impressive tartrates, yes.
Nail them to your walls or something, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, our next Wine Around the World is on September 12th. So mark your calendars and plan to come back, and Steve will select a couple more wines from a whole different region, and we'll check those out. So
Well,
again,
and
thank
lastly,
you.
definitely visit Basque Country, visit northern Spain. It's wonderful. It can pair nicely with also a little jaunt to France, because you're just separated by a short little drive. But yeah, wonderful place.
Hey, like I said, I'll be in touch for the
Absolutely.
travelogue.